Why is it so important to let go of regrets? Because regrets siphon your life force energy. And many of those regrets are subconscious. You forgot about them, but they're still back there causing havoc. Unprocessed regrets are one of the biggest forms of self-sabotage, keeping many of us from being able to transcend our present reality of limitation. And that keeps us from reinventing ourselves individually and collectively into this new golden age. Hi, I'm Carly Rieger, and this is the Golden Age Timeline podcast. So this is a very popular topic with many clients, so I wanted to share what's made the biggest difference for a lot of people. In our Mind Story Inner Coach book, many clients use the Avara model to break free of regrets. Plus, we have the Memory Imprint Journal course, which I'll talk about more in a moment. And also, if you like to learn through reading a page-turning adventure, this is a big theme in the fantasy novel Heliotropes, where the characters cannot transcend their consciousness until they deal with their shadows, their negativity, their regrets. So you can check all three of those out at goldenagetimeline.com/shop. So regret is like an energy morass that keeps people stuck in every culture, every race, every strata of society. Now, most of us are tethered to the past in ways we're both conscious of and sometimes unconscious of. So if you want to know how big this issue is, just ask someone you know, what is one of your biggest regrets? They'll be able to answer in seconds. And if you ask them to make a list, many people will fill up an entire page very quickly. Everything from, I should have stuck with my guitar lessons at 16 to, I should never have married so-and-so. So think about that for yourself. What's one of your biggest regrets? How quick does it come to mind? So I want to put forth a philosophy that made a huge difference in my life and in the lives of almost every coaching client I've ever worked with. And it's this: what if everything that happened in your past was perfect? It was meant to happen that way. Now, when I first heard that, I thought, no way. There's no way I can be okay with what happened 21 years ago or 6 years ago. But what if I could? What if you could? So pick one regret right now, the one that pops up first. What if it was all meant to be? What if it taught you something you need in your life now, or you will need coming up in your future if you really let yourself learn it? What if the people involved learned something important from you? Now, it's not to say bad behavior is okay, but since you cannot change the past, what can be salvaged from the situation? What if you could forgive yourself and others about that and just let it go once and for all? What if you had to have that experience because you actually learned an important lesson? Because often you can't learn until you face the consequences of unwise actions. Then you say, okay, that's not a good idea. Noted. And just apologize from your heart to yourself and others and let it go. Because if we could look at brain activity when a person truly forgives themselves and others about a past mistake, a misdeed, an offense, you might actually see the stuck energy leave the hippocampus part of the brain where trauma is stored and move to the neocortex, the outer part of the brain where wisdom is stored. And some researchers are even finding a certain type of brain cell in the heart. So what if forgiveness gives you a wiser heart, a more compassionate view of yourself and others, and helps you actually learn and grow rather than stay stagnant? So much of people's creative energy is stuck in this stagnant place of regret and resentment. Energy they could be using in their present to create the life they really want. For example, one coaching client did the 4-step process I'm going to talk about here and finally decided to let go of beating himself up for bullying a neighborhood kid when he was young. Once he did that with himself, he had the courage to seek the man out that he'd bullied as a child and asked him for forgiveness. The man told him he felt it was meant to be, that it taught him to stand up for himself, and he offered his forgiveness. My client was so relieved. He was on cloud 9 for weeks. And soon after that, he finally got going on the book he'd been meaning to write for years, and he got it done in the next 4 months, and fully attributes letting go of that regret with this surge of creative energy and mojo. Here's another example. I made an investment many years ago and ended up losing all my money and beat myself up about it. Huge regret for years after that. And I would say struggling financially. And when I finally let it go using this 4-step process, my finances turned around dramatically. It's what you focus on grows, right? Another client regretted her performance during a speaking engagement. She was new to the speaking circuit, and everybody else on the agenda was, in her opinion, a seasoned pro. And as she sat in the audience watching the other speakers before her, she completely compared herself and had this terrible fear that the audience would judge her as lacking in skill. So she did it, and she got bad reviews. And so I rewatched the video with her, and she saw how nervous and self-conscious she looked. And then we compared that video to other times she'd spoken to other groups where she seemed far more self-assured. So it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the problem is, right after that event, it stopped her promoting herself till we started working together and until she did this 4-step process, which broke her free from the regret. She forgave herself, and she booked 4 speaking engagements in the next 2 weeks. So although this process seems simple, its effects are huge. The 4-step process is called the Memory Imprint Journal, and the name comes from the fact that through this process, you learn how to imprint good memories that override bad ones, that change the way you view life, therefore the way you act, and therefore the results you get. And you can do the 4 steps in just a few minutes a day, and many people do them 30 days in a row to really anchor in the good effects. Just doing it once doesn't work as well as doing it 30 days in a row. And if you'd like to do the 30-day challenge, you can get this as an online course. Just look in the show notes for the link or go to goldenagetimeline.com/shop. So you would do it for a few minutes every day for 30 days in a row to really change the whole way you view yourself in life. And of course, you can also just listen to this podcast and do it in your head as you listen, whatever works for you. Most of us loop on regrets for years. So our brains are very efficient at that. And the brain doesn't change so easily when it's grown efficient at something. So you need to practice to retrain your brain to be efficient on more empowering ways of seeing yourself in life to get the positive effects in your life. The Memory Imprint Journal only takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to complete each time you do the 4 steps, and will ensure the weeds don't grow back in terms of the old negative habits of mind. The idea behind it is something called building resources in your unconscious mind. It creates fertile ground for planting the seeds of your goals, dreams, and visions. So if you've ever tried to manifest a goal and it keeps not happening, it's probably because you don't have enough resources. So a lack of inner resources is like infertile soil in your garden. So a garden full of weeds, toxic pesticides, rocks, or a soil that's depleted of nutrients, or it's too acidic. If you've ever tried to grow something in that kind of soil, you know what I'm talking about. The seeds won't sprout, or if you plant a flower in there, it'll wilt right away. So hundreds of people that we've worked with at Mind Story Academy have reported that just after 30 days of doing the Memory Imprint Journal, they notice things like their sleep improves, they feel happier, moodiness decreases, The people they live with find them more enjoyable to be around. They have increased motivation to face challenges or complex projects. They just get going on them. People report even physical pain in the body decreasing and finances increasing. So each time you write in the journal, you're strengthening the neural pathways until this positive perspective becomes default and you don't necessarily even need the journal anymore. So let's get back to the infertile soil metaphor. A big reason people can't achieve goals in life is because their unconscious is a mass of negative memories that are constantly being reinforced. That way they never get to move on and learn. They revisit this regretful time and get re-traumatized by it over and over again, even if it's a small thing. I had one client say she didn't want to put up a video on YouTube because the last time she did, there were typos in some of her slides, and she didn't like the way her voice sounded. But when she did this 4-step process, she just forgave herself for putting up typos and for sounding too rushed. She was finally able to try it again. She put up slides with no typos, and she slowed down, and now she does them all the time. And what many don't realize is that negative focus in one area of life tends to have a negative impact in other areas of life too. For example, if you have a habit of complaining about your work, many recent studies show that it can negatively impact your energy levels, your health, like you're more likely to catch a virus. It can negatively affect relationships and your happiness and sense of life satisfaction. So does that mean you pretend like there's no problems in your life or at work? No. It means you take action on the things you can change and find a way to accept the things you can't change. Even though many people are aware of this phenomenon of negative thinking affecting all areas of their life, they still let themselves get caught up in it. Why? Because brain research proves that if you think a thought often enough, it becomes a program, like a software program, in your subconscious mind. And those programs can run on autopilot the rest of your life until you change them. And your brain has gotten very efficient at that, so it just wants to keep doing it. So your subconscious mind is full of good and useful programs and bad and destructive programs and everything in between. For example, knowing how to ride a bike or read a book are examples of good programs. It's an efficiency of the mind. If you didn't have that function, then you'd have to relearn riding a bike and reading each time you wanted to do it again. The bad news is that sometimes you'll store a program that undermines your effectiveness. For example, a client of mine as a child was asked to read a book report in school, like at the front of the room, and he was very nervous, and so he messed up the process. He stuttered, he looked down, people laughed. Of course, the first time you do anything, you tend to make more mistakes because you lack experience. He hadn't been given any training in public speaking in a classroom, so it was justifiably an unskilled performance. That said, he made a decision at the time which went something like, I'm bad at public speaking, and that created a program that went into his unconscious mind, and he forgot about it. Then as an adult, he was asked to speak at a sales rally for the franchise he belonged to because he'd won an award. But he turned down the opportunity because of that unconscious program. He missed out on a chance to build his business and his reputation. If he'd only realized at the time that he could get over that self-image through this process and get some basic training in public speaking, he would have been fine. Now, eventually he did that through our training, and now he speaks all over the world to thousands of people and loves it. Many of us make decisions for good or for bad when we're really young, when our minds are very open and absorbent to programs, and then we forget we made those decisions. And they just seem like reality, right? When they're not, they're just a looping subconscious program. Now, sometimes those programs come from just watching your parents over and over again, how they respond to life, or listening to radio or watching a TV show. How do advertisers say you should live your life? If you want to be happy, you should be on the beach and be really skinny drinking Coca-Cola, right? Or how do your favorite TV show or movie characters make decisions? Sometimes the examples are constructive, and sometimes they aren't constructive. and yet we pick up on them and live our lives that way. For example, have you ever noticed that when a character on TV or in a movie is upset, they reach for alcohol? Is that the best way to solve an emotional issue? Not usually. Usually it makes things worse. They say, I need a drink. Do you see them work with a skilled coach or counselor or friend? Rarely. Maybe if it's a comedy, you'll see them try to talk to someone who's completely unskilled and it makes it worse. So there aren't a lot of examples of people resolving the inevitable emotional upsets of life in a skilled and constructive way. So of course people don't know how to do it. And that's why coaching is such a booming industry and why coaching tools like the Memory Imprint Journal are becoming more and more popular. They almost always work and don't leave you with a hangover and regrets about your behavior the night before. So it's very important to become aware of what programs you've taken on and to be able to override the ones you don't want and strengthen or add the ones you do want. So there's basically 4 steps to create those supportive programs in your unconscious. So let's go through the 4 steps. It's like a gratitude journal on steroids. You may have heard that the emotional frequency of gratitude improves your mental, emotional, and physical health better and faster than almost any other emotional state. That said, many of us aren't naturally grateful. The human mind has a negativity bias and will look for what to complain about. But when you think about it, for every one thing that isn't working well in your life, there's usually about 1,000 things going well, right? Even on your worst day, there's still lots to be grateful for. The focus of gratitude changes the way your brain processes experiences and literally dials up on all your mental, emotional, relationship, and even physical capacities. So you'll see in step 1 that you're going to appreciate yourself, and then in 2, you'll appreciate life circumstances. Now, why separate the 2? Well, in our research of people doing gratitude journals, most people just list external circumstances and never list appreciations about themselves. Or if they do, it's always about something they completed or accomplished and not about who they are as a person. So this Memory Imprint Journal makes you do that. Now, the biggest reason people stay stuck in life is because of self-criticism. You remember that negativity bias I was just talking about? Most of us focus exclusively on what we don't appreciate about ourselves in all aspects of life. It's just a default program, so don't make the mistake of beating yourself up about beating yourself up. The majority of people do it because it's a strong program in our society to be highly self-critical. I even find it within highly successful people who would label themselves as having high self-esteem. They dress well, they achieve great things, they act in admirable ways, but if you really get to know them, they are merciless with themselves. So make sure you list at least one good thing about yourself. And again, not just about something you accomplished, but a quality of being too, like being patient with my son or allowing myself to rest on Sunday. This is also a place to help forgive yourself by noting where you learned from a mistake, where you offered an apology, when you forgave someone else. Those kinds of states of mind and actions help release regret more than anything else. Then you'd list at least one external circumstance, like I have a roof over my head, or I enjoyed laughing with my family over dinner last night. And if you want to stretch yourself, try offering an appreciation for someone who you resent, who drives you crazy, just to begin the forgiveness process. For example, appreciating my neighbor who likes to complain about our dog because I get to practice patience, boundaries, and compassion. Then for the third part, it's the evidence of supportive core beliefs in action. Now, this is a bit more advanced if you're just starting out in the arena of personal development, but if you're familiar with the notion of core beliefs, most of us have many unsupportive core beliefs that take time to override. They're often a self-criticism or a pessimistic view of life or an erroneous view of life. For example, I'm bad with money, or I'm unworthy of forgiveness, or life doesn't support me. So you'd write down the opposite of 3 core beliefs you'd like to build in this way. I'm good with money, I'm worthy of forgiveness, life supports me. Then you'd write down evidence next to it each day to prove that this core belief you want to build is also true. Because there's always evidence for both, right? So it could be from today, last week, last month, last year, or any time in your life. For example, I'm good with money. You might write, I saved $30,000 when I worked overseas, even though it was 15 years ago. That's okay, because what you focus on grows. Next to I'm worthy of forgiveness, you might write, my mother accepted my apology last spring when she was sick. Or next to life supports me, you might write, got chosen to give the opening speech at the annual TCE convention. So finally, part 4 is to write out or speak out loud a short story. This is an example of a good moment in time, a positive perspective on a moment in your life. It's called memory management, and it can be very important to change your perspective on yourself and life. So again, this can be a story from yesterday, last week, last year, or 25 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's important about how you write out the story. It can be as short as 5 sentences and should start in the first person, present tense, stating age or time and place. For example, I'm 10 years old and on a camping trip. So this is how you take a mental snapshot of the moment by explaining what you saw, what you heard, what you felt physically, what you felt emotionally, and maybe even smells and tastes. Using the 5 senses helps your subconscious mind bring the memory front of mind. I'm playing baseball with the other kids in the campsite, and I hit a home run. I race around the bases and slide into home base just before the ball gets into the catcher's hand, and I score the winning point for our team. I can see people's smiling faces. I feel them slapping me on the back. I can hear everyone cheering. I feel really proud of myself and happy to be alive. Now, why would you choose a story like that? Well, let's say you tended to regret your performance in sports in general. And coming up, you were going to go out with family for a picnic and people were going to, throw the ball around, and you start remembering all those times you messed up in sports. So you would remember a time like that to dial up on your skills and bring that memory to the front of the filing cabinet. So imagine that your memory banks are like old Rolodexes or like filing cabinets with one memory per file. Most of us remember the bad memories. Those are at the front of the filing cabinet, easy to get to. The good memories are way at the back and hard to get to. So this process refiles the memories to the front. Why is that so important? Because let's say you want to reinvent your career in the face of this pandemic and lockdown. You want to find a way to, say, work online from home. You want to increase your income doing something you love. But all your memories are times you failed or had a hard time making a career change. Those memories are at the front of the filing cabinet. But now with this exercise, you decide to write out memories of times you made a successful career change, or any time in your life you were successful, because chances are there are thousands of examples you just forgot about. Now it's more balanced. Now it's much easier to find the courage and motivation to make the change because you remember the successes as well. Make sense? So as I said, you can get the Memory Imprint Journal if you go to goldenagetimeline.com/shop. You get a downloadable PDF of the 4 steps, and then you learn all the different ways to do it with 30 short videos where you're clearing out regrets daily from your past so you can transform your present day limitations and find freedom again. And you can also see how to get the Mind Story Inner Coach book and the novel Heliotropus there too. So that's it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe because it does make a difference to helping others find out about this. I hope that was helpful. Until next time, thank you for listening.